Hi, welcome to the Gen AI Mastery course. The goal of this course is to take you from a beginner Gen AI user to an expert Gen AI user in 7 sessions. My name is Lucky from Gen-Corp, and I will be your trainer in this course. Let's dive in. So we've done the first session, we've done the second one, and this is the third one. And hopefully you've learned about prompt engineering in the first session. And in the second session, you've learned about working with different files. In this third session, our focus will be on how to extract useful information from different types of communications. At work, you would have experienced different types of communications. In the last session, we'll focus on the files where those sort of communication, where they are saved and how they are saved. This time is working with the raw information directly, where you have so much of this information that are within the files that we worked with in the last session. This time, how you work around the different types of communications. And at the end of this session, you'll be able to make the best out of all that different types of information that you have. So you will be able to extract useful insight that decisions can be made on from that information. So we're in number 3, what we're looking at for the introduction here. So you have a lot of information that some of it is not useful, and you want to pick out a useful one out of it. This section will help you do that. The reason you need the useful information is to be able to make decisions out of it. So you're focusing on the intelligence from all that communication. There are different types of communication at the place of work. You want to be able to look at a whole lot of communication and say, okay, that's not useful at all. I don't need that. But I need these specific ones because it would help me make decision for the next quarter, for the next year, or for this project, or for this service, or for this product, and so on. To do that, you need to transform transcripts from long meetings or a lot of emails or email thread from the inbox and other types of information. So we're just focusing on these few ones that we're using for this example. Now we're focusing on workplace communication, and there are different types of workplace communication. We're looking at meetings, so the transcript for meetings and inboxes only. These days, there's a lot of online or remote meetings, and everything is captured in the transcript. So you can then take that transcript and get intelligence out of it to make decisions. What are you going to get out of this? The specific skills, the key ones that you can just jumps in your face from doing Discourse. The first one is you are able to extract useful information from different types of communication. And we're focusing on transcript for this session. And the other skill that you are going to develop from this course is how you use specific voices from different types of communications. So you train your generative AI to use specific voices or to align with emotion. Like it talks about emotional intelligence here, maintaining emotional intelligence. So you train your generative AI to create output or content in line with specific types of voices and emotion. So you identify the voice and the emotion, and then you embed that into your prompt, and then it creates a piece of maybe email or report or something using that. The third one, which is conflict and sentiment extraction, you're training your Gen AI to be able to identify cultural misalignment. I'll put it that way. So cultural misalignment within tests. For example, we're going to use the US and Japan in this session where the cultures are very different anyways. Because reading communication, a lot doesn't get said. It's easy to confuse or for there to be cultural friction. And because of that, there's misalignment. So how you use generative AI to avoid that, how you train generative AI to avoid that. And so you can then use it in your own context for different cultures. And it can even be within a country. It doesn't have to be the US and Japan. It might be within one country. So within the UK or within Australia, where there are different cultures in different parts of Australia. The other thing that we're looking at, it's like the first one, but this time we're focusing on specific characteristics of communication. How you train Gen AI to adapt communication characteristics like formality, like the tone, like the precision. Some people, they are very precise in their communication. Some people, they are very formal. Some people, they are informal. So it's how you train your Gen AI to stick, to align, to work with, to adapt communication with those characteristics. So you have the communication created, but then you adapt it with those characteristics, or you create it embedding those characteristics using the right prompt. And the last bit that we're looking at, it's more action-oriented synthesis. You create a structure from different messy communication. And then the reason for that is to support decision making. Again, you can see all of these points, they all blend together basically. So these are the things that you will get out from the skills, or these skills that you get out from this session would lead to, like we normally say, the success criteria. Why do you need to get that skills, or how do you show, okay, I have the skills now, this is what I'm getting out of it. The first thing is the intent preservation. So you can determine the reasoning behind the decisions derived from tests. So why are we making this decision from this test? So you can determine that. The second one is tone calibration. You create voices and tones and other types of communication characteristics. So you create these voices, tones, and there might be formality that is suitable for different audience. So you're calibrating the tone. So you create the tone with the characteristics for different audience using generative AI. And the third one is zero-law translation. It's about a different culture. So you acculturate the communication for different audiences. Like if you're a global firm where you have different stakeholders with different cultures, very different. Maybe you might have Chinese stakeholder, and then you have an Italian stakeholder, and then you are American. Very different cultures there. So you can use GenAI to acculturate the communication. You take the same communication, you acculturate it for the Italian stakeholders, and then you acculturate it for the Chinese stakeholders, so it's suitable for them differently. The other part, the next thing we're looking at is automated action mapping. Automated action mapping is like you sort of automate tasks and actions in the way that are suitable for different characters. Most of the time is the proponent or the advocate. For example, you have a meeting, and in the meeting someone was pushing for something. So you can use Gen AI when you get that transcript to align tasks or activities that would work with that person, what they were pushing out. It's their baby, to put it that way. They want this X, Y, Z to happen. So your tasks and actions, they are aligned to what they are pushing. So you automate the action mapping using generative AI. And then the last bit is a bias and defense audit. It's to professionalize or sort of neutralize communication. So you make it more professional, more neutralized, most of the times from negativities. You remove the negativity from sometimes, so you can use GenAI to create that communication. All of these is something you're taking out from this session. We have 3 activities. So the first activity is the meeting intelligence, which is probably what most people would like most from this session, because you would have been involved in several meetings where the meetings take hours and you just want the main point from the meeting and you don't want all the information that you can't use. So the keyword here is semantic compression that we've talked about before. Is reducing the size of information to retain the core meaning. There's a lot of information, but you reduce the size to retain the useful core meaning, basically. Okay, so a typical scenario, you missed a 60-minute meeting. If that happens, this would help you. Insofar as you have the transcript, you need a summary of the main things. You don't want all of that information that are not useful to you. Summarize this meeting transcript and give me the action items. If from the section 1, section 2, and section 3, if you end up seeing some of the beginner approach in what you used to do or what you already do, don't take it personally. That's why you're doing this course. It's to improve from doing that. Okay, it wouldn't capture the main nuance or disagreements, the specifics, the things that you need the most that wouldn't be captured. So the things that you need the most, it wouldn't be captured. And then the reasoning behind the decisions and all of that, a lot will be missed. But then you'll get a general, as usual with generative AI, generic summary, you see. And how do you do it? The expert progression. We start with a structured brief. With this one, it's a multi-part. So your prompt has to be very specific with different parts. You need to go straight to the point. You're saying, because you already work in that environment, you know the nature, you know the kind of meeting, you know what the meeting was about. You have the information, even though you were not there. You know what's needed, what's the main thing. That helps you. Or from previous meetings, you can use those. What was the main thing from those meetings? So here, we just came up with the usual decisions that were made from the meeting. In a typical meeting scenario, you have to contextualize it to your own context. And then the decisions made, and then number 2, action items and the owners who owns it. And then a question that hasn't been sort of asked. And then sentiment analysis. So here you can even have up to 10 different points that you want. insofar as it's from your contextualized knowledge of that kind of meeting, what normally comes out of it. And then you can even go further. You see this step here, a lot of it happens in step one already. From what happens in step one, you can then add different prompts. Here we just use this example of a decision log. And you can see a name is mentioned here. The reason that being, we use Marcos as an example, but then yours might be the CEO. You know that person or those people. You know the different camps. So here we are bringing in characteristics, emotions, and all of that. So they know the different camps in your team, and you know how there'll probably be counter argument, and how one camp is normally different in the way they say things. So you can build that into your prompt, even though you were not there. You know what would have happened. If it didn't happen, generative AI will tell you it did not happen, or it wouldn't add it to the prompt. But you're almost 100% sure that it happened, and you already have the transcript, and you've seen notes from the transcript anyways. So you can build that into the prompt. And then, having done that, you've looked at the main point of the meeting and different arguments, different contexts. Then you can do step 3, which is the follow-up. The last part is the responsible check. You're just checking the dates and the items. Having said that, let's dive into the first activity. As usual, this is the number 3, the communication and meeting intelligence file that will go with the course. And if you want to use the file like I'm using here, you have to download it to have in your system. If not, you won't be able to copy it. Okay, and we have 3 activities like we had in the last session. The first activity, we'll just crack on with that. I will just open this here. So I've already added a transcript and everything down here that we're working with. I will start with how not to do it. As usual, I'll copy the prompt. And then I'll add a transcript. So let me put a prompt first. And I have the transcript down here. I'm just giving generative AI the whole transcript, but then with that small prompt to summarize the meeting transcript. Again, it will do a good job, but then when you look in depth, you will see a lot of things that are missing. On the face of it, you will see how it looks. Let's start with how not to do it. Like you said, so summarize the meeting, so you get a summary. And the key point: budget overruns, regulatory documentation, engineering issues, cost versus risk, final agreement, actionable items, near term. All of this has been made up. Near term, actionable items. You didn't ask for it. So generative AI, they've created all of these themselves from what they know about meetings as usual. You see, but then the problem with this is that they probably not, some of them are not useful to you. Some of them might be useful from a typical meeting, but some of them might not be, so you wouldn't have everything. The same with the meeting summary. The points that have been identified here, you can see how they're very different. Budget overruns, regulatory documentation delay, engineering issues. If you're from a specific department, say you're from the accounts team, the first one might really matter to you. But if you're from a different team, it might not. But then it depends on who you are in the team, isn't it? So this is why you need specifics. And if we go to how it should be done, you will see the difference. It starts with decisions that has been made specifically because this is what you asked. And then action item, owner, deadline. So you capture the essence from the meeting, the action items, the owner, the deadline. And then the next outstanding questions that hasn't been asked. And then sentiment analysis, then a log. Exactly what you asked for. Here, you don't need to edit or change anything. And from that, it creates a follow-up email. And if you go in depth, you will see how accurate this email is in terms of these different areas. Because what you've done, basically, you've done a chain of thought sort of the chain of thought that we did in the first session. That's what you've done here, but you've aligned that, you've applied that to a transcript. You didn't just apply the chain of thought to a transcript, gave some precise prompt, and the email came out of that. So you did 3 steps before you go to the email. If you do it that way, you will normally get the right information out of generative AI. A lot of these steps, when you have a similar scenario and follow, you might not appreciate how specific, how concise, how accurate this is until you are in this context. And then when you do it for your own work context, you'll be like, wow, like this that just happened here now, probably 2-3% of editing needed of everything here, and that's it. Less than 10% of editing needed, and shoot the email, then the meeting happened. But if you follow the steps, how this happened, you see the power of this. Whereas, if you look at how not to do it, first of all, what are you going to do with all of this information that's been giving you general information and mixed with specific information? What are you going to do with it? It's already suggesting to draft email, but if you draft emails from this, you have to rewrite the email, most of it, which is a problem we're having in the industry now. So let's move on to the second part of the session. Having worked with transcript, now we're looking at inbox. We've all been involved with that, but let's just focus on what we are doing here. We are really focused on discourse personalization. Like I said at the start, it's trying to create someone's communication style using generative AI. The output and the content that generative AI creates is aligned with someone's communication styles. And we'll talk about different areas of communication, the tones, the formality, and so on. We have a scenario, we're using an inbox as a scenario, 20 unread messages regarding a technical glitch. 20 unread messages, be mindful of the fact that one of the messages might have thread. It's not just simple single messages. That means there's a lot on there. One thread might be 12 different messages. And another part of the glitch, another thread starts. You see, so you have all of that. But you need a status update for the board of directors, and you might be running out of time. And you want it to be personalized, calm, authoritative, technical. So you bring in those characteristics that I was talking about just now, using generative AI. If you wanted to do that, you have to go through the 20 emails and through the different parts of the thread. So you look the first one, look at the different thread, and in short, you have to make notes before you get to the 20th email. But then, with generative AI, it takes minutes. But how not to do it, as usual? You get the emails, you give it to generative AI and say, write an update for the board based on these emails. Disaster. Update about what? Because there's a lot in the emails. You will get the robotic draft, definitely 100%. Technical jargon and different characteristics that you don't want, that doesn't even reflect who you are. That would make it clear that you use generative AI. So how to do it, how to personalize it. The first one is the audience filter. Executive summary, because of the audience, what would be suitable? This is the second time we're using an audience to prompt. Sometimes you prompt with the audience, you look at the audience, what would they want? Remember what we did a prompt, the first bullet point. Now this is a different audience. The bluff is the common one. You start with the main point. Bluff is like you're starting with the main point, or you start with the conclusion. So either the main point or the conclusion or the recommendation. You put them in bullet point. You start from the end. That's why it says bottom line up before adding the other information or the other details. Generative AI, they like formats, they like frameworks, they like structures. If you know structures and frameworks that are well known, you give it to them and they'll do an excellent job of it, which is what we're doing with the bluff here. And the second one is the voice calibration. Now you're aligning the message to that person's voice. If they are calm or direct, so what is their tone? How do they normally speak? How do they normally write their message? A good thing here is that you only need, if you're the one creating it for yourself, you need examples. Or if you've done it before, you need what the tone, your characteristics is called, like hey, it says calm. So if your characteristics, how you write a message is calm and direct, you know that, then you don't need the example, you just tell GenAI, calm, direct. If you're not sure, you get a few messages and ask generative AI to tell you your tone and your voice characteristics. It will give you the list specifically. Then you can use those. Now it's the things that you normally don't do. Maybe because of your role, you don't use technical words, you don't use buzzwords and all of that. And then how you approach, you focus on what's happening and how do we resolve it. Current status, path to resolution. So here, step 2, you're really personalizing the content. But you need to know this about yourself. But if you don't, you use examples and you get it from generative AI, and you can then use that. So you do it in different steps. Step 3, it might be needed, it might not be needed. It depends on the content you're using. If it's a meeting where there was a lot of emotions, rising, and people trying to defend things, which happens, then you probably need that. And then you might be working with teams where this happens a lot. But your content might be different. It might not be about defensive language, or it might be something completely different. So using this structure, this approach, these steps, then that comes into your own step 3. It might not be shifting blame. It might be a case of avoiding the task or avoiding the project or avoiding the duty. So that one is common also. So that is not shifting blame to engineering team. It might be another thing that happens within the teams. You build that into your prompt. And the last step, it's the responsible Gen AI check. So we've given an example here, like fixing data and all of that, that shouldn't be happening. But if you have to check if generative AI has done that, obviously, to make it responsible. But having said that, let's practice this. So as usual, we'll start with how not to do it. The beginning approach. It says to write an update on my board based on these images. So I'll just copy the images down here. And give it to generative AI and then run that. Then the prompt, how to do it, the steps I will follow. I've already converted that here already. I've already followed these steps 1 to 4. I've already done that, translated technical keywords and so on. So I'll run that in the order Copilot. Let's start with looking at board update, platform outage, incident as overview, customer, current. So what you're having here, it's some selected version of the information that you've given to generative AI. There's not, because in the prompt you said write an update based on the image. And so what's happened here, choose to start with the customer impact, current status, and they've given you updates in this area that it thinks are the most necessary in terms of updating. And this is come from its intelligence from the internet and other prompts that it's worked with before. But the problem with that is it might not be useful to you. It might be useful to some, but not everyone. Because when you give it your own personal prompt, your own sort of expert prompt, you see it uses the bottom line upfront approach, the block format. So here, generative AI does this, but then it gives you everything that you need specifically. All you have to do is to delete this. How long does that take just to delete it? And something like that, bottom line upfront. So these are the basic editing that you do, and maybe some other editing. Because of the prompt that you've given here from that meeting, you can see it wouldn't take up to 10% of editing here, because it's giving you what you asked for. If you look at the prompt down here, executive summary, what to use, the tone, the status, resolution, path to resolution, that's what is done. Quick summary, current status, path to resolution. With a path to resolution, you might have to edit it, but it won't take much time. So this one here, It's just telling you what it did. You see. So basically, again, with the right prompt, you have the right output ready to go. You don't need too much work to do with it. So it pays to take time when you're doing the prompting. And the more you prompt your generative, the more it learns, because you're training it as you go. That's something you need to understand. And then if you do repetitive tasks, if you create a proposal all the time, get a template that you use. Get your prompt template and a template document of a proposal. So you get both. You get a prompt template and a document. And you upload that document. Once you upload it to your generative AI, depends on what subscription you have. You already have that. In the future, just say use document XYZ and move the prompt. You just edit it and that's it. And that's how it works. Okay, so we've done the second one. Let's move on to the third part of this session. The third part is about cultural intelligence. It's very important if you're multinational or multi-regional. Like some countries, they have different regions where the business operate, and the differences between the regions might be a lot. And I normally use Australia as an example. Even though it's one country, you can have a massive amount of cultural differences between one region and another region, or one state and another state. This is where this comes into place. Or it might be something that's very different culture, like Chinese, the US culture, or Japanese and an Italian culture, or the French and maybe a Brazilian culture. So there's proper cultural difference. This is where this comes into play. So you try to localize with the communication. And it says contextual localization. Like it says that you're just adapting or you're aligning the generative AI output to that specific culture. We're going to use an example of a culture and a corporate environment together. So you align the GenAI communication to a specific cultural context. But beyond cultural context, you have other contexts that you can align it to. So you can take this example to other contexts. It might not be cultural context, but it might be like a funny context. So you want it to be light, to be funny, or you want it to be academic, or you want it to be religious. So it's taking that information, what you're creating with generative AI, to align with the context that you want to create. But we're focusing on culture here and corporate. So a combination of corporate and culture, because this course is for work. It's work-related course. And because it's work-related course, we use work-related example. This is the scenario. So you want to send a proposal to a potential partner in Tokyo. And the style is the casual US style. And it might seem disrespectful to the stakeholder in Japan. So you have to adjust to fit that culture, that different culture. The beginning approach, as usual, translate this email into Japanese for a business partner. The problem with that is it would translate the casual style email or the local culture, the email, to that other language, but then it would transfer the characteristics of that local culture. And in that other culture that you've translated the email to, it might be offensive. This is a problem, or it might not make any sense. In terms of the grammar, it would be correct because it's generative AI, but it might sound cold or inappropriate, or it might be even worse, offensive. And that would damage the reputation. But how do you do it? What's the right way to do it? The first step that we did when we did the first session, personalization, it comes to play here also. Who are you doing this for this time? And then a cultural element for that other culture. This is written in the English language first. It hasn't translated it. And then the reason why, because you wouldn't know, say you're American, you wouldn't know, for example, okay, go honorific language, so you got to know, because you have to review. So you have to ask for explanation. Why did he use Keigo? So you can understand the cultural sort of nuance. Before the reverse translation. Now you've done it. You have two options here. You can do it in English and then translate it to Japanese, or you can do it together with Japanese. You can translate it or do the reverse translation, but normally, again, depends on the language that you're translating to, the culture. There are different factors, so you play around with different. There's no one size fit all here because we're talking about culture and some characteristics of languages. But if you follow this step and you find that out, you get what you want, then it's fine. When you do the first step, you translate it while it's doing that and with the explanation. Then you do the reverse translation, or you do the first step in English, and then once you've done the explanation before you translate it, or you can do both of them and then see which one meets your needs the most. There's no hard and fast. It's the end product, the output. Insofar as, like it says in step 3, the meaning, the core business meaning hasn't been lost. That's the main thing. And you've retained the tone and all the language characteristics the way you wanted it without being offensive and all of that. And then the last step, so you have to check it. That's how you know step 3 properly. Everything remains accurate, even though you've adapted the culture. This is very important. I can assure you, it's very important. You don't want to do the adaptation and something goes really off. Okay, so you check it. Now let's do a quick practice of this last step. As usual, we'll start with the beginner approach, how not to do it. I'll just put it in there. And add the pitch. You run it. Now I'll do the prompt. As usual, I've already written the prompt following the 4 steps. I've done everything together because this is a short pitch and you can do it all in one go. Now, let's see the first bit here. Directly, you get a Japanese version. Even though you said to write it and then it's going to do it in Japanese version. It becomes a disaster if you take the Japanese version and translate it to English. Several things would have happened. The characteristics of the communication would have changed because it's are different languages. The generative AI would do some of the areas would be a good job, but your own characteristics that you want to pass across might not be there anymore. This is the problem. Your own characteristics that you want to pass across might not be there anymore once you translate this back to English. But then if you leave it as Japanese, you're just taking this and translating it to Japanese. But because Japanese is another language, that's the problem again. Because it wouldn't be able to translate some of the things here specifically. So generative AI would have to find a way to make it work. It wouldn't tell you that I can't translate some of the words in English to Japanese directly. That's the problem. In your own free time, you can try and take this Japanese version and translate it, use another GenAI to translate it to English, and then compare between this first one that you've written and that one. You might get surprised. Let's focus more how to do it. Now, all of that prompt has been given and the steps has been followed. So you have the K-goal long term. This is a bit been emphasized in the email already, and it gives you the phrases that was changed, so you can then check it yourself. Friendliness, which is very different from the US culture, and replace you guys are crushing it with respectful. So it gives you the steps of the things that is happening because of the prompt that you gave it, and you can see how much has been changed. That tells you that the other prompt, if you haven't done the prompt properly, it's going to be a disaster. If you see how much has been changed. Game changer, I'm looking to move fast, aggressive discount language, all of that before the back translation into English to confirm the business meaning is lost. So then you can then read this and review it. Now, you can either send this in English or you can then translate this version to Japanese. Again, it depends. It's not ideal. It depends on the culture. This is where generative AI can be helpful also. Is everything retained? This is the question. So the safe way to do it is just to leave the English version. This is the safest way, but if you have to translate this version that is being worked into that language, then you need some other prompt. And one of the other prompts that you need is what's been retained and what hasn't been retained because of the language differences. So because of the language differences, what have you retained? What haven't you retained? For some cultures, they have different versions of that language or different. I try not to use the word dialect, isn't it? But it might be the same dialect, but something very subtle because of the differences in the place or something. So it's the same dialect, but there's subtle differences that wouldn't be captured by generative AI. That's another thing to be mindful of. But what we've done here works very well if you can retain it in English language. Because you can read it, you can check it, you can change things around. But in essence, this is one way that you work with different languages. The scenario and the prompt are the key things that you want to focus on in the course. From session 1, session 2, session 3 to session 7, focus on the scenarios and the prompts and how you adapt that to suit your own specific context. Let's do the last part of the course. As usual, the course is heavy on responsible way to use generative AI tools. So at the end, we normally have how that very session can be done responsibly and irresponsibly using Gen AI. Irresponsible Gen AI doesn't mean the person is irresponsible. It's just how they've used the Gen AI. And something might seem responsible, but when you consider other stakeholders, their own positions, it quickly becomes irresponsible. When you look at the definition of responsible generative AI usage, focusing on usage, okay, you will see there's a lot of emphasis on ensuring that all stakeholders are looked after. You're fair to all stakeholders. Their interests are considered, and that's where this comes from. What do I mean by that? Is personalizing Gen AI content. When you personalize the content, instead of using them generically, then you're going toward the responsible side. You're not just sending the message the way it is. The cultural issues from that message would have affected the relationship from the beginning. But when you personalize it to the Japanese executive, you've done something responsible. Sometimes a lot get deleted because of the prompt. That's why you have to be explicit in terms of prompting, intent preservation. What you need to be preserved, you need to be specific about it. The third one, the cultural blindness, which is the main part of this session that we've covered, is trying to be responsible. You have to check things around. But the steps that we've given you that I use, the step that I used just now to translate the English or the US email to a Japanese one, the expert step, that works most of the time. If the final message that you're sending is in English, that way you can acculturate the message, even though it's in English, but it fits that culture more than your own culture. That way it's responsible. Like I said, the last step of then taking that English version and converting it to the language of that culture, it's a bit tricky because there are things to consider. If not, you still have to do some prompting, which I've said before. And the last part that says overcompression, again, is missing out good information because you've compressed it. So you've used generative AI to compress information, but you've missed that. So the goal here is to capture the vital information. However long it takes to capture the vital information, that's what you need to do. So if it's a 50-page transcript, well, to capture the vital information will take 10 pages. Then you go for the 10 pages. That's the responsible thing. If you have 50 pages of a transcript and you want to compress it, you need to get out the vital information from it. If the vital information takes 10 pages of the 50 pages, then that's what you do because that's the main thing. The goal is not to reduce 50 pages to 2 pages or 5 pages. Then things will be lost. So focus on what's vital, what are the vital details that shouldn't be left out. As much as you have that, no matter how long it takes, then you've done responsible sort of compression using generative AI. These are some of the things that you have to consider when it comes to responsible generative AI in this session. And this is the third session. Before we go into the fourth session, self-assessment is the scenarios, two areas to focus on, the scenarios and the expert prompting. Try to look at the scenarios, how it might be exactly what you're doing, which should be great for you if it's exactly what you're doing. So we've taken scenarios that would be common to different workplaces. So obviously we try as much as possible to align our scenarios to workplaces, but sometimes because workplaces are very different, the contexts are very different, it might not align. So you have to adapt it. You have to adapt it to your own scenario, your own task, your own activity. Once you've adapted it, then you edit the expert progression for that scenario. So the expert progression fits it. And remember, with the expert progression, you add more information. We use basic information because this is a course. We can't have all the details in there. We'll be here forever. But you're doing it for your own task. For example, if you're using PTCF, your persona should be robust. It should have enough information that will help the generative AI to create good information. And the task should have enough information. And the same thing with the format and the context. Remember that when you're using the expert progression. Once you've done all of that, then you run the prompt and then always compare. Always compare. That's how you see the difference. Because if you don't compare, sometimes you might not even see the difference. Compare how you used to do it before doing this session and how you're not doing it. Compare the output, the differences, or how you used to do it before without even using Gen AI. And now you've used Gen AI. And you see. Our next session is session 4. Having done sessions 1, 2, 3, you should be having a good grounding of how generative AI works. Even though we are looking at different areas of being an expert in the use of generative AI, you can see similarities. You can see in all the areas you have to prompt, but we are using different scenarios, different types of prompting, different types of context. But all these 7 areas, once you're able to do them properly and you're able to follow the activities that I've done, adapt that to your own workplace, to your own practical needs, you are a master user of GenAI, my friend. That's the plan. So if you've done steps 1, 2, and 3, sessions 1, 2, and 3, and you're able to do all that expert progression steps in all the sessions properly in your own organization, you've gotten a lot out of this course already. But there's still more. We still have sessions 4, 5, 6, and 7. I will tell you how much important the other sessions are. You have to do all 7 sessions for you to be able to say, I'm an expert user of generative AI tools. And the next session is about rapid generative prototyping. It's sort of trying to use a single concept to a multimodal campaign or a multimodal prompting. We're going to use a marketing campaign for that or similar. Multimodal prompting, it's where you create brand consistency, text, visuals, and other content for different modes. Using in a very, very rapid way, something that would have taken the team, weeks to do, you can do it in a few hours using generative AI. And then we also look at prototyping to take a single value proposition into different phase of a marketing project or a marketing roadmap. You see it, and different steps. So we use a bit of marketing there because we're talking about creative product and asset generation. So we do a bit of marketing in that session, but we've designed it in a way that it can be applied to other areas. It's not limited to marketing only. And finally, if you haven't done this session, you felt like the information you've gotten, what you've done is useful, but you want it to be more contextualized to your own workplace, your own scenarios and all of that, and you've tried to adapt the scenarios yourself, but you still need more, then you can always contact us directly at info@geneducate.com, and then we can line the session to your own workflows, your own activities, your own duties, and your own workplace scenarios. And we can do that for the whole of the course. That means the whole 7 sessions. I look forward to seeing you in the 4th session. Have a good day and bye-bye for now.